I'm here with Casey Seymour of Moving Iron Podcast. Hi, Casey. Thank you for being on the show.
It's an honor, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
So let's go back to the beginning, your childhood. Did you grow up in ag or farming?
I did not. No. The closest thing to any kind of ag-related background that I had growing up was I hauled hay. I lived in a small town. I live in a small town of Eureka, Kansas is where I spent my childhood, and then I moved over to El Dorado, Kansas when I was freshman or sophomore in high school. I can't remember. I think sophomore. But the summer between... I needed to buy a car, so I needed to find a job. And the only place I could find a job that was willingly able to and couldn't wait for a big dumb animal like me to show up was the guy that had some hay bales to move. So my first exposure to agriculture was hauling hay one summer. That would have been my freshman summer going into my sophomore year. So saved up my money and helped purchase a car with all the hay bales that I moved that summer.
How was doing hay baling for the summer? I used to do that.
It was so fun that next summer I didn't do it. I found a job that paid twice as much and I had to work half as hard, so I figured that was a win.
No, my least favorite thing was when we'd have to unload the hay racks, and there'd be like a half cut off snake or something, and it was always the hottest days of the summer.
Yeah, it was never very cool when we did that. It always seemed to be the hottest part of the day, but I did enjoy it. It was fun. There were like, I don't know, 3 or 4 of us. I worked on a hay monster. And then I worked on the old, the pop-up bale thing on the side of the trailer. Worked on those, and not a lot of. You didn't have to be all that crazy intelligent to stack hay bales. Obviously, that's why I was pretty good at it. But it was one of those things where you could just all you had to do was keep your head down and work, and didn't have to do much in between. And I did enjoy it. It was fun, but it was one of those things too where if I didn't have to do it again, I wasn't going to raise my hand if I didn't have to.
That's right. Find a different job, maybe like find a different responsibility or role on the farm. So yeah.
Yep.
So you started Moving Iron Podcast, you said back in 2015?
2015, yeah. I started my company, the Moving Iron Summit. I started that back in 2013, which was a dealer kind of a networking convention type of thing. In 2013 and 2016 was when I actually recorded my first podcast. I think it was like May or something like that, 2016.
What was the inspiration behind that? What made you go down that path?
Really, it was just as a used equipment guy in the business of farm equipment, I wanted to get all the help I could get to make my job easier and pick people's brains, and that's kind of where the Moving Iron Summit came from and kind of stemmed from. Then I thought, let's put this stuff out here to where we record these conversations, and maybe some people can learn from stuff that I'm learning from. But selfishly, it was very much if I can learn something from you and implement it, then I'm gonna. Kind of my old adage is always, if you steal from me, you're stealing twice, because somebody else, I probably got it from somebody else. So it's one of those things where I could easily take my ideas and bounce them off people. They could take their ideas and bounce them off me, and then I could get a feel where they see the market at and where I see the market at, and have those conversations about what's going on. Because, it's like anything else. It's pretty easy to get stuck in your little bubble and your little echo chamber, and you start hearing some other opinions. It kind of opens your eyes a little bit to what's going on around you.
You've been in the farm equipment business for a while. What are some of the trends that you're seeing here for 2024?
Yeah, 24 was COVID really messed up everything for everybody, right? So when you look at how the crazy thing, the biggest thing that happened in the farm equipment business coming out of COVID was that when supply chain management caught back up across the spectrum, it didn't matter if we're talking clothing or, car parts or farm equipment or whatever it was. When supply chain caught up, it went from, 0 to 1,000 miles an hour, all within just a very short amount of time. What you saw happen in the farm side of the business was like, 2022 was a really tough year. 23, the first quarter of 23 was kind of tough, but you started seeing some of that slack getting taken out of the supply chain. And as that got tighter and tighter, the drum got a little bit louder and a little bit louder as things got tighter. And as you look at what happened, 2023 was a year where about 2.5 years worth of trade-ins came in all at one time. Because 2021, there was a very slow amount of equipment that got delivered in the fall, which you typically see. Mm-hmm. Some of that carried over into 22. But 22, again, a lot of orders didn't get delivered out of the factory in the fall, but they got delivered that first quarter of 23. So you had all the 2021, 2022 trade cycle stuff come in 2023. Of course, you had all the 2023 stuff come in at the end of the year on the 24 stuff that got delivered. So you had a huge surge of used equipment hit the market all at one time. And when if COVID hadn't happened, you would have seen a very, matriculated amount of equipment kind of flowing through that cycle. Well, all that stuff hit at one time, and then commodity prices contracted on top of that. So now you've got this huge supply and demand that's now shrinking. So now you've got this big pile of 1 to 2 year old, 3-year-old stuff sitting out there that is just having a hard time finding a home, coupled with, over the last, I don't know, 3 years or so, you've probably seen anywhere between 40 and 60% increase in the price
I
of
was going to
equipment.
say,
So
what has been the increase in the equipment? Because it's just been astronomical from my perspective.
yeah, even me. I mean, as a guy that was looking at it every day, it was one of those things where, a 2019 combine, for example, would have been, $450,000 probably. And then you fast forward to where we're at today, and that same combine is $700,000. So it's
Right.
a huge increase across the board, and it's all due because of supply chain stuff that came up, and the surcharges of steel and those kind of things that all popped up during COVID. The bad thing about prices like that, when they go up, when they raise, just like anything else, it's very hard for them to go backwards, which you don't necessarily want them to go backwards either, because then that's a deflationary area that you're in, and that's a whole nother level of economics. But as you look at where things are at, I mean, you couple that, and then you had, I want to say it was like a 211% increase in interest rates during that same time frame. So you have really, really expensive stuff anyway that you're paying a whole lot of interest on top of anyhow. It's just kind of like a perfect storm hit. Anything and everything that could have made the used equipment supply and demand structure go crazy to the downside happened. And it's we're kind of starting to see, I feel like we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, even though it's very dim and a small round speck of white light at the end of the tunnel. But it's you can start to see it a little bit here, and I feel like 25 is going to be better. I have my concerns about the first quarter and a half of 25, but I think after that, I feel like we're going to start seeing what the quote unquote new normal might look like for the marketplace.
That was going to be my next question. What do you see going forward with farm equipment?
Yeah, so I think it's a weird, we're kind of at an unprecedented time, I think, a little bit, when you start looking at farm equipment and how things play together. When you look at how technology, for example, so I'll pick on John Deere here for a little bit, but if you look at basically the machines that were built, 8R tractors that were built from 2020 on, they're all autonomous ready. If you look at the 9R they just rolled out with, they're autonomous ready, and everything else is going to be autonomous ready too. This got to get the right wiring harness and those kind of things to make it work. But, the autonomous approach to equipment is one of those things that it's like a mixed bag a little bit. Not so much like the mixed bag that we saw with AutoTrack, where people were like, oh, this is just a fun toy. There's so much technology on this equipment nowadays that a lot of producers are looking at it like, okay, I'm kind of starting to understand where I'm at now. Let me catch my breath before I take that next big evolution into whatever that might look like, right? Of course, you always have the early adopters, and they're going to obviously, if you're a guy like me, I have whatever gadget is the newest gadget out there as soon as it comes out. But, it's one of those things where kind of watching those things progress along. I think that's going to have a big play in where we see how equipment's bought and how equipment is sold, but also these upgrade kits that you hear people talk about. You can take your old planter, make it new again. You can take your sprayers are getting to be a lot like that, and it's not necessarily just a Deere thing anymore, or precision type of thing. Precision came out with their Cornerstone system, which is a complete row unit, just like Deere's system is. So now you have a complete row unit that you can put on every manufacturer's piece of planting equipment out there now. So that kind of changes the way people might start looking at planters and how that works together. The other side of that too, on the sprayer side, you no longer have to spend the $600,000 or $800,000 to get the new planter or new sprayer. With the latest technology, you can add all that stuff. And so what's that mean in the use side? That's
been a really nice thing about the whole autonomous and upgrading your equipment, because my brother and I, we use older equipment on our farm, but we've been able to upgrade, put in monitors, upgrading row units. And so that's worked out really well. Now, I just went to the Nebraska Ag Expo, and the autonomous items out there is just mind blowing.
Oh yeah.
Like, do
everywhere.
you think that farmers are going to adapt to that well, or do you think that farmers are going to still want to be in their tractors
Yeah, so we had this debate the other day on the podcast. Me and Aaron Phil and I were talking about this, and I'm a big fan of autonomy. I think it's going to be just primarily the cool factor. You know what I mean? Not too long ago, there was a company called Smart Ag, and they recently got 3 or 4 years ago, maybe longer than that, got purchased by Raven, but they had the autonomous grain cart tractor. And that was one thing that they were doing. And it was cool. I watched it work in the field. We had it at the dealership and watched it work in the field. And it was awesome to watch a tractor driving around by itself. Nobody inside of it, hooked to a grain cart, pulling up next to the combine, getting filled, and then going over to the grain trailer and dumping. It was amazing to watch it do that. So I think, the one theme you hear over and over again in ag when it comes to what's going on with ag and how things are structured and what it looks like, it always comes back to the labor issue, right? Whether you're talking about high value crops or you're talking about just your row crop that have, some hired employees, a few hired employees here and there.
The livestock guys,
Yeah, livestock guys.
Around feed and...
Yep. And I've even seen some autonomous feed trucks that they're doing stuff with that. So I mean, there's some stuff there. But I think as you look at autonomy, I think the two things that will be forever, it'll take a long time before a farmer says, I'm cool with the machine doing this, is planting the crop and harvesting the crop, right? Those two things I think are going to be the last two bastions of autonomy that slowly get how that works. And, maybe it's some leader follower technology or something like that, where one guy can operate multiple machines at the same time type of thing. But the planting is so important, right? And obviously the harvesting, and everyone trusts the monitor now, right? But do you trust that monitor from inside your office? That's the other thing that you have to, overcome.
And the whole rewarding fact,
Sure.
Your train of thought and your motivation getting into the field, you want to be a part of that. Same with harvesting it. You want to be able to watch it and see what it looks like from the cab of the combine and the monitor. And so I agree with you. I think it would be really hard as a farmer to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to sit here on the couch and run my remote, or however it will work.
Yeah.
I
think some of the grain handling stuff, I think that's a no-brainer. We start looking at grain carts, and you start looking at, moving seed tenders around and those kind of things. You start looking at tillage. Tillage is probably one of those ones that can do that. You start looking at spraying, I think maybe a little dicier for some folks, because of course, again, it kind of comes back to you're trusting what the monitor's saying, right? Inside your machine, and you're trusting that it's doing that. Again, are you confident enough that are you going to believe what's on your screen if you're not inside the machine, right? And how anxious are you that? Because, you could be spraying twice as much as you're supposed to, or half as much as you're supposed to. And what does that look like, and how does that affect what you got going?
We've all ran it technology. You don't know until you're actually doing it. And you're like, oh, this is totally coming out wrong. This is totally not doing what it's supposed to do. And so do you want to be sitting on your couch or in your office when you realize that? Or is it something you don't realize until 5 days later when you go to check something in person, like a crop scout?
Yep. So I think as you look at those kind of things, I think the easy low-hanging fruit for autonomy is the grain cart, tractor, tillage piece, those kind of things. I think it's a generation away before you see anybody that's like, I'm going to let my combine do the work. I'm going to let my planter do the work, and I'm going to focus on other things. So I think that's going to be a bit. But, that being said, I mean, there's a lot of technology that can come into play where if you're an operator that runs multiple combines, for example, I mean, there's technology that already exists now. They just have to, hook it into what you're doing. But, you could one guy could operate 2 combines in the same field, and then also operate the associated grain cart tractors and those kind of things with those as well. So one guy could do what maybe 4 or 5 or 6 people would normally do in that situation. So that changes the dynamic quite a bit too of what's that look like. And then, like there's a lot of guys out there that are heavily reliant on, foreign migrant workforces and those kind of things. H1, whatever is that, H1 visas
H2O.
or H2-1, H2-1 visas and stuff. So how's that change that dynamic, and what's that look like? So, this is kind of a cool time to be in ag right now when you start thinking about it, because there's so many changes that are coming right now that are going to, and it's not like, I had a conversation the other day with a guy where we were talking about kind of the history of machinery and kind of what it looks like. And if you were, grandma, grandpa, great grandma, great grandpa, you start looking at where they're like that jump from the horse and plow to a tractor and a plow was a big jump. That was a big, huge
Right.
deal, right? But then you started just looking at, okay, well, now I've got a horse or a tractor and a plow, but now I've got a tractor and two bottom plow. Now I've got a tractor and a four bottom plow, and so on and so forth as horsepower and things and got bigger and bigger. When you kind of got to like, if you really start looking back up until Auto Guide, like the technology associated with the machines that were out there it's really size and horsepower and efficiency. That's what you're looking at, right? Like the bigger the machine was, the more you get done, those kind of
Right.
things. Auto Guide comes into play. You start playing the okay, well now my efficiencies, what it actually costs me to farm is starting to go down because I'm not overseeding or overspraying or over fertilizing or whatever it is. I'm maximizing everything that's out there. And then so as that kind of bumped along for the last 15 years, I mean, there was a few things that kind of 15, 20 years kind of see some things happen. What we've seen happen over the last 5 years, since 2020, the technology that's been rolled out has the speed of which that's come out. And See and Spray is a good example of that. When See and Spray, the first generation See and Spray came out, See and Spray Select came out. 6 months later, See and Spray Ultimate came out, and it was a completely different setup. And that most of the See and Spray Select machines weren't even delivered yet when the newest version of See and Spray came out on the next iteration of machinery. So now you start watching how these different versions of machine intelligence starts coming out, and AI this and AI that. That level of technology is coming so fast that it's hard to keep up. And I think that's where some producers are looking at this going like, this stuff's coming at me so fast. I barely know how to use what I have now. And you want me to jump to this next iteration, and you're telling me that it's easier, but I don't even understand what I've got. So I'm not really interested in making that next move right now, unless you give me a big case for it. And I think that's some of the hang up, I think, in some producers' minds right now is like, pump your brakes on this technology thing for a second. Let me catch my breath and figure out what I've got. And then let's start moving down this path. But, it's hard to do that when the technology train starts rolling, just like anything else. I mean, the horsepower train, when it started rolling, it didn't stop. It just kept getting bigger. And now we're all the way up to, a big Bud's 1,000 horsepower, and you got 915 horsepower, 35 horsepower, four-wheel drive stuff out there now. So, I mean, before too long, it's just going to be, how much bigger do we get? How much more horsepower do we get? I kind of feel like we've gotten to that point. But the technology thing it's just like a computer. My computer price that I've bought, the last 3 computers I've bought have been about the same price, but they're about 3.5 times more powerful than the ones that I bought the previous generation. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So
and I look at, I can totally relate to how things have changed from the 1930s forward. So this thing hanging on my wall right here, that's a corn planter. That is a walking. You put the seed in it, and that's how they hand planted. And I went to old thrashers. My grandpa has an old gleaner of my great grandpa's on display down there, and it's from 1936. We have family stories on it, but just to stand there this fall and look at it, and I've never really just stopped and grasped that. It's got a 6-foot platform on it to combine with. And my brother and I, even though our equipment is older, is like, how much did ag change in 50 years from when, he started farming in the 30s to when that combine came out in the 80s or 90s. And then you're right. Like, I feel like time has just compressed so fast over the technology and the size of our equipment, because I just think back from the early 2000s when I started farming, you thought, wow, how much bigger can this stuff get? And then jump to 2015. Like you said, the past 5 years of technology that has come out is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. I used to think about that too. There was an old video I used to play in the dealership that was an old John Deere's Day video, and it was one of those things where they had I was like auto reset on a 3-point on a tractor. I don't remember what it was. But I remember watching that video, and the guy doing that was like, I don't honestly believe they could make this any better. I don't know how they could make this any better. And your great grandpa probably thought the same thing about that combine. He's like, this is what they could possibly do to make this any better. And look at where we're at now.
Yeah, because his first combine that we have pictures of, his combine is being pulled by horses, I believe.
Yeah, team of horses,
so that upgrade just from horses to an actual moving combine that went on a tractor had to have been such a joyous. It was
mind-blowing. Like, this is so much better.
Yeah.
Wow, this is pretty, I don't know how they can make this any better, and then they put a cab on it. Like, I don't know how they can make this any better. Now it's got air conditioning. Oh my God, this is so much better. Next thing you know, it's driving itself. It's just every year they do this. They come up with that next best thing, Like just like even me, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm thinking like, what could you possibly do to a combine now to make it better? What are you going to do to it to make and they'll figure something out that'll make it
They
better,
will.
right? But I'm just the same way. Like 50 years from now, there'll be someone being like, I don't know how they farmed with that stuff. It's just crazy. And
I know.
here we are,
It's humbling, but it's pretty mind blowing all at the same time.
Yeah.
To watch
really is.
everything in ag that's spelled out. And it's spilled into just not row crops, but livestock and different things going on out there. So,
yeah. Well, that's the thing too, like the autonomous feed trucks that people want to test and those things. That's a game changer now. So now instead of having like these big feedlots where you're running 3 or 4 shifts, 24 hours a day out there doing stuff, how many shifts of people do you really need to have? Just, people monitoring a monitor really is what you need. And that changes the dynamics of the way a farming operation works or a ranching operation works.
And then, so you started talking about it, the whole adding on to older equipment, the different kits that you can put on, the different things. Where do you see that going? Because from my perspective, I'm not going to go spend $500,000 on a combine to go combine a couple hundred acres.
Sure.
I can just see, where that definitely has a place right now.
Yeah. That's a work with planters because that's the proven case study out there, what that looks like. So, I look at it and I think there's about 4, maybe 5 ways that you can buy a planter now, right? You can go to the dealership and say, hey, I want to buy a brand new planter out of the box, right? They order you one from the factory. You have the used one. That was that trade-in, right? That's just the same way it came from the factory. It's just you have it sitting there. You can upgrade what you've got in your barn, right? You can take your out of your shed and upgrade what you've got and make it new again. And then you've got the upgraded stuff that's been used now. So now it's a used upgraded planter, right? And then you've got the custom bar stuff that you see some of these, it's like a welding shop or some stuff like that. They'll do some things like that, or a precision planning group or something like that. I'll have some of these different custom bar situations. So you got about 5 ways to buy a planter. All 5 of those ways are dynamically different in what you do, right? So if you buy a brand new one, you know what you're getting. You buy a used one, you know what you're getting because you can go and look at it. And the one thing about planters is that the way you want your planter set up, the way I want my planter set up, even though we're neighbors, is probably dynamically different, right?
Completely different, yes.
Everyone's got a trash wheel or a planing wheel or something like that, a seed blade or something like that they think is better than the next one because they saw it at the last farm show and got their mind blown, so they're ready to move forward with that one. And I think the same thing is a little bit on the upgrade side of it. Even though you're taking an entire row unit and replacing that, where the hiccup in that comes is I've got a 2014 bar and I've got 2024 row units on it, right? What do I have? Do I have a 2024 planter or do I have a 2014 planter? Do I have a 2020 planter or do I have what do I have?
Right.
And I think that's kind of where the jury's at a little bit on some of that right now as to what to have. I used to always look at it as I would take however old the row units were, and I would pretend like it was 5 to 7 years older than the row units, right? So if it's a 2024 planter, I'm thinking somewhere between a 2018, 2019, 2020 style planter, and that's kind of what I'm looking at. To me, the bar is probably the most over-engineered ag piece of equipment on the planet without you doing something catastrophically, amazingly awful to it, like bouncing it off the side of a bridge or something like that. I mean, your bar is going to hold up pretty well for quite a while, right? So, as you look at those things and how those things play out, what do you have? It really changes the dynamics of the planter market because, I can take your example for, a couple hundred acres. I can get an 8-row planter now and have the same level of technology that's on a brand new planter and go out and plant my 200 acres at the same level of efficiency that the guy that's got the latest and greatest technology, right? I can use the same, electric drive technology. I can use the same pneumatic downforce and those kind of things, or hydraulic downforce and those kind of things that are out there now. Individual row units, stuff to where I can put my soil profile into my system and knows when I get to a different level of a field, I can increase or decrease the rate of my planting. I can increase or decrease the pressure on each individual row unit so that seed is getting placed in the best possible place it can get in there. And I'm planting a lot of corn where it's going to grow good and not as much corn where it's not going to grow as good. So I can really go through and do all that kind of stuff. I can do the same thing with my fertilizer on that planter now. I can, increase or decrease the rate of fertilization per row and do all those things. So all that stuff is it might seem like, oh my gosh, this is such an expensive investment for my few hundred acres, which it is, don't get me wrong. But if you're looking at economies of scale, that's where that technology starts to come into play. And I used to think that, hey, as all this technology came along, it's going to favor the larger, biggest farmer out there a lot more than anybody else. But with these upgrade kits, to me, it's a bit of a leveler if you think about it. You're going to have the same access to technology that the biggest of the big have, just because of what you're able to upgrade to. And now, will all these upgrades, will you be able to take everything that's on a new sprayer, a new combine or something like that and upgrade it to? I have a hard time believing that, just because of some of the stuff that's kind of built into things, but maybe you will be able to. But if you can get 90% of the picture and you kind of have to guess with the rest of it and kind of freehand the rest of it, I feel like you're going to have a great opportunity to be as, competitive. More, I think a smaller farmer moving forward would have the ability to be as competitive as the larger farmer can be as far as yield growth goes. Now, obviously, costs and those things, associated price points and those kind of things, are going to be dictated on what you buy, just like they have been forever. But it's going to be interesting to watch how the co-ops and those kind of things play into this, because more and more, especially if you're talking about sprayers, I mean, my goodness, you talk about if that 70% reduction in chemical that See & Spray's claiming, and the same thing that on AGCO's Smart Farm and those kind of things, a suite of stuff that they have, if that is true, and you are reducing your fertilizer and chemical costs by 70%, 75%, 80% in some cases, I don't believe that there's a chemical company out there that's going to be like, hey, we're just going to have to build our right size our company for an 80% reduction in revenue. I don't think that's going to go over very well. How do they measure that? And is this the dawn of a true subscription-based pricing, where they're going to say, you pay us so much an acre, we'll promise to keep it clean and keep your crops growing like they're supposed to?
That's another thing with the technology, is the memberships, the sponsorship,
Yep.
the payments that,
Yep.
How does that look 10 years down the road?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that looks. I think that's going to be, I think that's going to go away anytime soon. I just don't see where that changes, but I think it's going to be, I kind of look at it like this, and this is my opinion, so take it for what it's worth. But my opinion is, if the point where you have a self-driving car and you don't need someone to drive it anymore, and you just need to have a car show up when you need to get in it, is there going to be is Uber going to be in every town now, to where I just say, hey, I need to go to the grocery store, and I hit a button, the car shows up, I get in the car and go away?
That's
if that happens,
so weird to think about.
Do I need a garage at my house anymore? Right.
Like
Start thinking about that. So now if you're a farmer and you have all this self-driving stuff and you just need stuff to show up, there's been companies that have tried to do this, like escapes me now what the name of that company was that did that. But, they tried to do we'll make sure you have a combine when you need it. You just have the combine head. And if you don't need
of equipment,
and it just, you have these swarms of equipment just kind of roll through your area and harvest your crop or spray your crop or till your ground or whatever it is that they're doing. And it kind of goes away. So as a producer, why pay for a combine 365 days a year when you only need it for 30?
Right.
And why pay for a tractor, 365 days a year when you might only need it for 6 months out of the year? All those kind of things start coming into play. And I think that's where I think some of the subscription-based modeling is going to come to. I'm not going to buy your equipment. I'm just going to subscribe to it, and I'm going to have a combine show up or whatever when I need to have it show up. And now I can already hear people saying there's weather and there's this and there's that are going to, and I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not relying upon labor to move stuff around, and you just have, it's just there making its way through the area and doing things different. It's a different animal, I think, than what we're used to seeing right now, I guess.
And going back to the whole DoorDash thing, what about an app? Instead of needing to call your seed guy or your fertilizer guy to bring stuff to you, you just schedule it on the app that you need it from 10 to 11 a.m. on Tuesday morning, and it just shows up.
Yep.
I don't know. It's crazy to think the technology that we have in our everyday lives. It's like, why don't we use some of that more in ag? But
yeah,
I think we're getting there.
Yeah, I mean, it's my goal was always I wanted to be the first guy to sell a combine on Amazon, 2-day delivery, free delivery type of thing. I think we're a long ways away from that, but I think it's one of those things where you could, so much of your life right now you can schedule without talking to a soul, right? And I don't think it'll be that much different in ag. Of course, the relationships that go into that and all the stuff that play into that are always kind of the fun part of being in a business like this, right? The relationships that you build along the way. But if you look at how a lot of people, I mean, on your farm, like how are you guys wanting to interact with people is not all that much different than how other people want to interact with people. You have a business to run and operate just like everybody else does. You just happen to be an ag, right? And you want people to, you don't want everybody just to show up and say, hey, I'm here, let's have a conversation, because you got stuff to do too, right? So you're kind of working through that whole, what's that look like and how's those things play together. And I think that's changing where, hey, if you want to come out, that's great. I'm free from 11 to 12. You can come out to the farm and talk to me, but I'm not coming into town unless I just happen to be there.
Well, and I think it just helps, people like yourself selling equipment or someone selling seed or fertilizer. I mean, everybody wants a good work-life balance. We're all busy. We all have a personal life. How convenient would it be to look at your calendar for the week and be like, Joe Blow down the street wants his stuff delivered on Monday, and this lady wants her things delivered on Tuesday. It would also be beneficial that way. And if you think about it.
Another thing too, I mean, AI is it's mind-blowing and scary at the same time, right? I mean, my joke all the time is I watched a great documentary on that one time, and it was called Terminator, but everybody died at the end. So it was, it's just one of those things where you have I use ChatGPT a lot for things, if I'm doing research on something like that, I can go back through and start building that stuff, and then, go in and add where stuff need to be added, double check things and those kind of things. But it's what would take me sometimes a week to do, I can do in 30 minutes by just asking the right questions, and building the right information. You couple that into what we're doing here, and you're starting to see like how AI is playing into, crop production and how, crop protection, and how AI is playing into, the insurance side of stuff, crop insurance side of stuff, and all that stuff. The efficiencies that are coming are going to allow you to have that app, so you can say, hey, if I get this here between 10:30 and 11 o'clock on Tuesday, that'd be great. And you'll probably be able to do it. So it changes the way people think about their operation, and it changes the way how people approach the companies coming into ag too. That's a whole nother conversation. The amount of venture capital money that's coming in, and of the non-traditional channels of people that are finding their way into ag. So it's a very interesting time that we're in, for sure.
It is. Yeah. It's been interesting to watch the past 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then back over the past 100 years of farming. So, but yeah. Well, Casey, thank you. How can people find you? Why don't you tell people how they can find you online?
Yeah, so I really am. I'm not very good at social media, but I post all my stuff on these places. So you can find me on Facebook, X, Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. You can go to LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast. I have a YouTube channel, Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. Let's see where else. I'm on TikTok at Moving Iron Podcast, and I got to go to movingironllc.com, and you can find everything that's Moving Iron related there.
And if anybody wanted to get some help on their equipment, getting it sold, or how can they find you? How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can just go to the website, and there's a contact me part of that you can go there and you can fill that out, or you can shoot me an email at movingironpodcast at movingironpodcast.com, and I'll be sure to get back to you.
Well, thank you for talking about equipment and your journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Rachel. It's been awesome. I really enjoy your TikTok stuff you put out there, and it's always a good time to see you. So thanks for having me on your podcast.
Thank you.